You may have been praying for weeks, months, or even years, and nothing happens. You know that feeling of talking and it seems like God doesn't even listen? Well, you might be making mistakes. One of these 3 silent mistakes that completely nullify your prayer, and worst of all, without even realizing. In this video, I will open your eyes about what is really blocking your response. Even if you pray with faith, go to church and read the Bible. It's not a lack of effort. It's the wrong strategy. You won't hear any cliches or generic advice here. Let's get straight to the point. There are 3 attitudes that make your prayers simply not go past the ceiling, and many Christians make these mistakes every day, thinking they are pleasing God. Based on the teachings of Dr. David Yonggi Cho, one of the world's greatest spiritual leaders and author of countless testimonies of answered prayer, you will understand in a simple and straightforward way why God may be silent with you and what to do to break through that blockage today. If you're tired of praying and not seeing results, this video will be a game changer. Only watch if you are ready to be confronted, corrected, and set free. Why whoever understands this unlocks heaven, and whoever ignores it continues praying alone. So watch until the end, because the 3rd error is the most subtle of all, and it is the one that most silences God. Now that you understand why your prayers were stuck, everything begins to change. You'll no longer pray in the dark, nor waste words God never asked you to hear. This knowledge has opened your eyes, and the least anyone can do after being set free like this is share. Like this to strengthen this message and subscribe to the channel, because future videos will give you even more keys that unlock heaven. Those who have been transformed by this truth have the mission to continue receiving and spreading what sets you free. This journey is only beginning. There's one thing that almost no one has the courage to say, but that you need to hear once and for all. There are prayers that God simply ignores. It's hard, right? But it's true. There are people who spend their entire lives on their knees, repeating beautiful words, crying, shouting, singing hymns, fasting, and yet it feels like they're talking to walls. The feeling is one of emptiness, silence, abandonment, and the worst part is that most of these people are sincere. They truly believe they're doing the right thing, but they're not. And that's where the problem lies. Many people confuse effort with direction. They pray a lot, but pray incorrectly. They talk a lot, but say what God isn't asking them to hear. And do you know what this causes? Spiritual fatigue, frustration. The person begins to think that God isn't listening, that he's taking too long, that maybe they don't deserve to be heard. But in reality, what's happening is that she is making mistakes that turn her prayer into silence. And it's not just any mistake, it's silent mistakes that go unnoticed even by those who pray every day. And I'm not talking about people far from faith. No. I'm talking about people who go to church, who read the Bible, who fast, who sing praises, who even counsel others. But when it comes to prayer, you fall into an empty cycle. On the outside, it seems spiritual, but on the inside, it's just formality. And that's where the first mistake comes in. Pray with the appearance of faith, but with the heart far from it. People enter prayer as if fulfilling an obligation. They pray a memorized formula, an automatic text, repeating what they heard somewhere. There's no commitment, there's no truth, and without truth, there's no connection. Have you ever seen people who speak to God with the right words but with their souls disconnected? Has it happened to you? Because it has to me, and it hurts to realize this. It hurts to realize that our hearts are saying one thing and our mouths another. We say, "Lord, I trust in you," but inside we're filled with fear, doubt, anger, and anxiety. Do you know what one of the things Dr. David Yonggi Cho said most often? That prayer without faith is just noise. Pretty words don't impress God. What moves heaven is true faith, the kind that comes from deep within, even when everything seems impossible. But look, true faith isn't emotion. It's not shouting. It's not crying. It's trusting even when everything is dark. And what happens to many people is this. They learn to pray in a beautiful, formal way, with rehearsed words, and they think this will move God. But God isn't interested in your vocabulary. He wants truth. And truth is what's inside your heart as you speak. That's why so many prayers become noise. God doesn't even hear it because he doesn't respond to facades. He responds to sincerity. And here I want to make a request. Comment on the word true down here so I know you're with me in this reflection. Because if there's one thing that's missing from many people's prayers today, it's this: truth. Now, you know what's worse? When, in addition to praying without true faith, a person prays haphazardly, without direction, without purpose. This is the second error that destroys prayer. Talk a lot, but not know what you're asking for. People who talk for 20-30 minutes straight, but in the end, they don't even know what they asked for. It's as if they're talking to God out of obligation, to ease their conscience, but without a clear objective. They pray like this: Lord, help me, do something in my life, open a door, but what door, what help, in what area? What exactly do you want God to do? Dr. Cho taught this all the time. Effective prayer is specific. God doesn't respond to confusion. God responds to faith with a purpose. When you have a clear purpose, your faith is activated. When you have clarity, you pray with conviction. Now, when prayer is vague, the mind wanders, the heart grows cold, and the spirit grows weary. And there's more. When you pray without clarity, do you know what happens? You don't recognize when the answer comes. God even answers, but you don't notice, because you didn't even know exactly what you wanted. Have you ever seen people who are always asking for things, but never know whether they received them or not? They live frustrated, always waiting for something that may have already happened, but they didn't notice. That's why prayer without purpose is so dangerous. It keeps you in a cycle of dissatisfaction. You never feel answered, never feel heard, and this undermines your faith, it cools your spirit, and the consequence is clear. You stop praying, or you keep praying but without life, and then we return to the first mistake. See how one thing leads to another? Some people say, but God knows what I need. Of course He does. He is God. But the point here is not whether He knows, it is if you are aligning your faith with what you need. Prayer is an act of partnership with heaven. It's taking a stand, it's saying, oh God, I believe you can act in this specific area, and this is what I'm asking. When you do this clearly, heaven moves. Not because God needs information, but because you are activating your faith with focus. And that changes everything. Faith without direction is like an arrow fired without a target. It hits nothing. And there are many people who are tired, hurt, and frustrated, simply because they never learned to pray with purpose. They pray just for the sake of praying. They speak just for the sake of speaking, and then they think the problem lies with God. It doesn't. It's with the method. Now stop and think with me. How many times have you prayed for things you couldn't even explain? How many times have you finished prayer without knowing what you were really hoping for from God? This gives you a clue as to why so many prayers seem to go unanswered. And the most painful thing is that the more you pray like this, the more distant you feel, the more unmotivated you feel, because praying without results is tiring. But the good news is that this may change now, and it's not by changing the amount of prayer, it's by changing the form, the direction, the heart. But there's something even deeper we need to talk about, something hidden that may be silencing your prayers even when you think everything is fine. It's the kind of error no one sees from the outside, but which completely closes the ears of heaven. And that's what we'll talk about in the next point, because perhaps this is the real reason God is silent with you. You can pray beautifully, with faith, fast, go to church every week, help others, and still not be heard. Do you know why? Because there's something that cancels out your prayer right at its root, and this is where the third mistake comes in, the hidden sin. And no, we're not talking about visible, scandalous sins or things everyone notices. We're talking about those little filths we keep secret, those areas of our lives we try to hide even from God, as if that were possible. Hurt, pride, envy, lies, hypocrisy, impure thoughts, unforgiveness. All of these seem small, but they completely block your prayer. It's like trying to call God with a line full of interference. The message doesn't get through, so you start praying, and nothing. Instead of looking inward, most people blame God's timing or say it's a test of faith. But heaven isn't late. The problem is that the channel is dirty. Dr. David Yonggi Cho said it very clearly. Prayer and sin do not mix. Where there is unconfessed sin, prayer loses power. And God, out of love, is silent, because He wants to first heal your inner self before delivering what you're asking for. And the scariest thing is that this has nothing to do with perfection. God doesn't require you to be perfect to pray, but He does require you to be truthful, that you have the courage to confess, to repent, to let go of what is separating you from Him. There are many people trying to maintain a spiritual life with divided hearts. They want miracles, but they don't want to give up. They want answers, but they don't want transformation. And so they live trapped in this cycle, praying, waiting, getting frustrated, praying harder, fasting, campaigning, and still without an answer. Because the problem, it is not in the intensity of prayer, but in the dirt it carries. Have you ever noticed that often we want God to change everything around us, except our hearts? We ask for healing, provision, open doors, reconciliation, but we harbor resentment toward our Father, anger toward our ex, envy toward our brother, lies in our marriage, pride in our eyes. And God, who sees everything, remains silent, not out of cruelty but out of love, because before answering He wants to cleanse you. He wants to restore the channel, because He doesn't just want to give you a blessing, He wants a relationship with you, and a relationship requires truth, repentance and cleansing. It's like trying to drink pure water from a dirty cup. It might quench your thirst, but it will poison you. God doesn't pour living water where there's contamination. So, before you continue praying as usual, maybe it's time to stop and look within. Is there an area of your life that you're hiding? An attitude that you know isn't pleasing to God, but you insist on holding on to? A wound you refuse to forgive? Then comment on the word here, cleaning. So I know you're too willing to experience a real transformation, because that's the first step, recognizing it, and pay attention. From the moment you confess, God hears. The Bible says He is faithful and just to forgive and purify. The problem isn't making mistakes. The problem is hiding. Hidden sin fuels distance, and this distance is what makes your prayer lose power. Now imagine, what if the answer you so desperately await is being blocked by something you've been carrying inside for years, something you've normalized, hidden, justified, but that's screaming in the spiritual world and getting in the way of everything. Do you have the courage to look at this today? Because in the next point, we're going to talk about something that seems very spiritual, but that may just be another way of you run away from confronting the truth. And maybe that's what's cooling your life with God without you even realizing it. Now that you understand how hidden sin can be silencing your prayers, the next part is even more delicate, because it involves something that seems right, seems beautiful, even seems spiritual, but which in practice is just another barrier between you and God. And here I want you to be careful, because what I'm about to tell you now catches many people off guard. Maybe it's happening to you right now and you haven't even realized it. The fourth mistake that turns prayer into silence is this: pray, 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 but never stop to listen. That's right. There are people who pray too much, talk too much, ask too much, but live with such internal noise that they can't recognize God's voice when He tries to answer. It's the kind of prayer where a person enters, unloads everything that's stuck inside, cries, screams, begs, and when it's finished, they get up and leave. They don't wait, they don't breathe, they don't remain silent. They believe that praying is just talking, but they forget that the heart of prayer is listening, and listening requires silence. But nowadays, let's face it, who has time for silence? Life is busy, your cell phone buzzes constantly, you have notifications, worries, people screaming in your head all day long. And then, when you go to pray, you follow that same fast pace. You say everything at once, as if you were making a grocery list, and then you rush out. But God isn't a counter clerk, He is a father, and a father wants conversation. He wants relationship. He wants exchange. Dr. David Yonggi Cho had something powerful to say about this. Most people talk to God like they call someone and hang up before they answer. It's like calling someone, pouring out everything you're feeling, asking for help, saying you urgently need direction, and then hanging up without even waiting for a hello. Sounds absurd, right? But that's exactly what we do. We talk to God but don't let Him speak back. And what happens? There's silence. Not because God doesn't want to answer, but because we didn't give Him space. And there's more. When you don't become silent to listen, you run the risk of confusing God's voice with your own thoughts, or worse, with what you want to hear. You begin to interpret everything as a sign. You begin to force answers. You begin to put words in God's mouth. And then, besides being far from His will, you still believe He is guiding you. And this is the most dangerous point, because it is spiritual self-deception. The person lives frustrated, lost, anxious, thinking God isn't acting, when in fact He is. She is not giving any space to listen. And to listen, you have to stop. You have to silence your cell phone, your mind, your pride, your anxiety. It's about stopping talking for a few minutes and just being there, available. No script, no control, just you and God. Sometimes He doesn't answer the way we expect. Sometimes the answer comes in a verse, a memory, a tug of the heart, an inexplicable peace. But to realize this, you have to be present. You have to develop the habit of listening. And this only happens when prayer stops being a speech and becomes a conversation. Tell me something honestly. When was the last time you finished a prayer and remained silent just to hear what God wanted to say? I'm not talking about hearing voices, visions, or anything like that. I'm talking about sensitivity, about spiritual intuition, about opening your heart and saying, "Speak to me, Lord. I'm here." That alone changes everything, because it shows that you recognize that His voice is more important than yours, that His will is more secure than your plans, that His direction is worth more than your desperate attempts to control everything. And you know what's most beautiful about all this? It's that when you start listening more and talking less, your prayer changes level. You no longer pray out of desperation. You pray for connection. You don't pray out of anxiety. You talk out of intimacy. And then, yes, God begins to reveal things to you that you would never understand amidst the noise. He begins to align your will with His. And the result? Peace, direction, certainty, confirmation. And you know what else? Answers. Comment the word here, to listen. If this part touched something within you, because there are many people who need to silence the world around them to finally hear what God has been trying to say for a long time. Maybe you've been searching for an answer for weeks, months, years, and it's already come, but you still haven't stopped to listen. And in the next point, we'll talk about a mistake that seems small but slowly destroys your faith and has caused many people to give up on prayer just when the answer was coming. There are people who are one step away from the answer and then give up. Just like that. They throw everything away, they stop praying, they stop believing, they stop insisting, and all because of one thing: lack of perseverance. This is the fifth mistake that turns prayer into silence, and perhaps the saddest of all, because the person did everything right, was faithful, prayed, believed, purified their heart, learned to listen, but got tired, because the answer took longer than they expected. And then they begin to wonder, has God forgotten me? Would it not be meant for me? Am I praying wrong? And slowly, the once lively faith turns to doubt. The once intense prayer grows cold. And what was supposed to be a miraculous process turns into a cycle of frustration. But there's a truth that no one told you. Or maybe you've even heard it but ignored it. God does not work in His own time. He works in the right time, and this timing is almost always different from ours. While you want it now, He wants to prepare you. While you want the blessing, He wants to shape you. While you're asking for the open door, He's shaping your character so you don't get lost when it opens. And if you give up before that, do you know what happens? You lose what was coming. Yes, it was coming. The prayer was being answered. But you gave up too soon. Dr. David Yonggi Cho taught a lot about this. The faith that receives is not the faith that prays just once. It is the faith that keeps praying until it sees the answer. The Bible is full of examples of this. Remember the persistent widow who went to the judge? She didn't stop until she was heard. And Jesus used this story to show that this is how we should pray, insistently, firmly, boldly. But today, most people want quick results. They want to pray today and receive tomorrow. And when that doesn't happen, they consider giving up. But God isn't a microwave. He won't rush to do a profound work in your life. Miracles aren't fast food. And you know what's even more cruel? The enemy knows this. He knows the answer is near. He senses when heaven is moving in your favor. And then he starts throwing thoughts at you. Give up. It's taking too long. You're not worthy. God isn't listening. You're praying for nothing. And if you're not steadfast, you believe. And you start praying less, doubting more, growing cold inside. And before you know it, you stopped. You let it go. You moved on. But heaven was still working on the answer. The answer was on its way, and you stopped halfway through. How many blessings have you missed because you didn't persist until the end? How many times have you missed seeing a miracle because you couldn't wait any longer? This is serious. Because perseverance in prayer, it's what separates those who just want relief from those who truly trust. And look, there's no one who perseveres in prayer who leaves empty-handed. It may take time, it may come in a different way, it may surprise you, but it comes. God honors those who persist, those who continue, those who pray even without seeing anything change. Because this is true faith, continuing to believe when everything says it's over. I know you may be tired. I know there are times when you feel like throwing everything away. But breathe. Return to your secret place. Talk to God, even if it's just a phrase, even if it's just an "I'm here," because sometimes it's that small gesture that shows God you haven't given up. And that's when He moves. That's when heaven responds. That's when victory begins to be released. Comment the word here, continue, to show that you're still on this journey, that you won't stop halfway, that you understand that the prayer that transforms isn't the prettiest, it's the one that perseveres. And now hold on tight, because in the next point, we're going to touch on a wound that almost no one admits, but that keeps you from the answer, without you even realizing it. It's something that seems noble, seems legitimate, but in reality, there may be a selfish intention behind your prayer, and that changes everything. Now that you understand how crucial perseverance is, let me tell you something that might hurt a little, but it needs to be said. There are many people who pray, insist, fast, cry, campaign, climb mountains, set goals, and still they remain unanswered. And it's not for lack of faith nor for lack of effort. It's because something that is hidden behind the request, something that even seems beautiful, even legitimate, but that deep down reveals a wrong motivation. Ego. This is the sixth error that silences prayer, and it's one of the hardest to recognize because it masquerades as spirituality. It's when prayer appears purposeful, but is actually born of a selfish desire, a personal agenda, an ambition God never placed in your heart. You know that kind of prayer that sounds right but has a false meaning. The person prays for a promotion at work, but what they really want is status. They ask for a restored relationship, but deep down they want to prove to the other person that they've won. They ask for more money, but to squander it, compete and show off to others. And then they enter a dangerous cycle. The more they pray, the more frustrated they become, because they think they're asking for something fair, something good. But God knows the heart, and He knows when motivation isn't aligned with His will. Dr. David Yonggi Cho always said this: God does not answer prayer based on ego, He answers prayer based on purpose. And the problem is that we can't always see this hidden ego. We justify it, we disguise it, we spiritualize it. But God isn't impressed by pretty speeches. He searches the heart. And if He sees that a prayer will distance you from Him, will lead you to exalt yourself, to fall into pride, to live by appearances, He holds you back. And out of love He remains silent, because before giving you something, He wants to ensure it won't destroy you. Have you ever considered that God might be protecting you when He doesn't answer? That the blessing you so desire might be the beginning of your downfall? Sometimes the request is even good, but it's coming from the wrong place, and God won't cooperate with your ego, because He's not complicit in your vanity. He is a father, and a loving father says no when a yes would hurt. And look, this isn't meant to condemn you, it's meant to free you, because many people are stuck, frustrated and stuck in life, thinking God doesn't listen, when in reality He's just waiting for a change of direction. He's waiting for you to clear your motivation, to truly pray, with sincerity, with surrender, with a broken heart, and not with that hidden intention of showing off, winning, getting revenge, or proving something to someone. God doesn't play games of vanity, and as long as you keep praying based on your ego, you'll continue to hear silence. But when you stop, take a deep breath and pray like this: Lord, I want this, but only if it's your will, only if it doesn't separate me from you. Show me, correct me, guide me. Then everything changes, because now you're not just asking, you're surrendering. You're not imposing a plan, you're submitting to His plan, and that changes everything. Prayer stops being an attempt to convince God and becomes a conversation between a child and the Father. A real, honest, mature conversation. Have you ever stopped to reflect on the real intention behind your prayers? Have you ever asked God if what you want is what He wants for you? Because sometimes the frustration in your prayer life isn't because of what you're asking for, but because you're asking. And when you understand this, your life changes, your prayer changes, and your connection with God becomes alive, strong, and powerful again. So comment here on the word purpose So I know that you are willing to align what you want with what God wants for you. And hold on tight, because in the next point we'll talk about something that seems simple, but is one of the biggest reasons most people stop praying before their time. It's a type of spiritual burnout that builds up, and before you know it, you're cold, empty, and thinking there's no point in praying anymore. But there is a way out of this, and I'll show you how. There is one thing that few people have the courage to admit, but it destroys the prayer life slowly and silently: spiritual fatigue. You know when you've prayed so much, tried everything, campaigned, made a resolution, woke up at dawn, fasted, and still nothing happened? Then, little by little, you start to feel exhausted. Prayer becomes a burden. You no longer enter with the same fervor. You no longer believe like before. You no longer feel anything. You bend your knee, but deep inside there's a voice saying, "This again, what good will it do?" And so, without realizing it, you enter the seventh error that turns prayer into silence, discouragement disguised as routine. The person continues to pray, but now it's automatic. There's no more life, no more thirst, just habit. And that's what kills prayer from the inside out. Because God doesn't answer prayers out of obligation. He answers prayers with truth. And this isn't about quantity. It's not about praying more. It's about praying with dedication, with your heart. But when you're spiritually tired, even that seems impossible. And it's okay to acknowledge that, because pretending everything's fine when your faith is exhausted only distances you further from God. Most people get to this point because they carry too much weight without sharing it with the Father. They try to solve everything alone, praying with their own strength, without rest, without pause, without listening. And then, of course, at some point, the engine breaks down. You weren't made to be under that pressure all the time. Dr. David Yonggi Cho said that one of the enemy's greatest traps is to make you so tired that you drift away from the source without realizing it. He doesn't take you away from prayer all at once. He drains your energy, making you doubt, distracting you, leaving you so overwhelmed that you simply give up inside. And worst of all this happens while you're still praying. Yes, you can be praying, and still be far away, because your spirit has already shut down. And this is the kind of wear and tear that weakens faith until it almost disappears. But there is a way out. There is a way back. And it all begins when you stop pretending and decide to start over. When you acknowledge that you're tired but still choose to get up and speak to God in your own way, with your own words, with sincerity. God doesn't want perfection. He wants a heart. And if you have the strength just to say, "Father, help me pray again," He will hear you. He will renew you. He will restore your faith. He will rekindle the flame that has gone out. Now listen to this carefully, because this is where most people get completely lost. People want to overcome spiritual fatigue on their own. They want to remain strong, motivated, and excited, but far from people, far from the Word, far from the presence. And this leads directly to eighth mistake: moving away from the presence and trying to continue by force. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it never will. Prayer isn't willpower, it's connection, it's dependence. And when you try to follow your human motivation alone, it breaks down. Because everything spiritual can only be sustained by spiritual nourishment. And that comes from one thing: presence. God's presence is what heals, restores, renews faith, cleanses the heart, and rekindles the fire. When you distance yourself from this presence, everything in your life withers. You may continue serving in church, helping people, being a believer, but inside, you're already dry. And that's why so many people lose the strength to pray. It's not because they're weak. It's because they're disconnected from the source. And without a source, there's no river. You may even try for a while, but it will dry up. And that's exactly what the enemy wants: a generation of people who pray but are disconnected from the presence. Because this generates frustration. It generates doubt. It generates distance. And people don't even realize that it all began when they stopped seeking presence and started seeking only results. And the most subtle thing of all is that this distancing is almost never intentional. It happens gradually. You get distracted, busy, start to lose your constancy, and before you know it, you no longer feel anything. You no longer hear anything. The presence that was once alive now seems distant. And then you pray, and what do you feel? Silence, emptiness. And you think God has abandoned you, but He never left. It was you who walked away. But the good news is that you can come back, today, now, with a sincere request, with a broken heart, with a short but truthful prayer. Now that you understand why your prayers seemed unanswered, everything begins to fall into place. What was holding you back has been exposed, and from now on, every word you direct to God can carry clarity, faith, and truth. This content unlocked hidden areas within you, brought light to points no one had ever explained to you, and above all, put your prayer life on the right track. And just look, just as this video helped you so directly, it can also transform the lives of others, and it's with a simple like and subscription here on the channel that this begins to happen. Comment below the word freedom to seal everything revealed today and to show that you're determined to no longer live a shallow spiritual life. And hold on tight, because the next video will show you what no one talks about: the prayer that moves heaven, the kind of prayer that opens doors that have been locked for years. It's the next step on this journey, and you won't want to stop here. Everything is connecting, and the next revelation will be even deeper. Keep going in this direction. This is where your prayer life will truly begin.